As the creator of some of the greatest games ever made, from Railroad Tycoon through Pirates to the Civilization series, he has already taken his place on the list of legendary game design icons. And he's not done yet. So please join me in welcoming the Director of Creative Development at Firaxis and the father of computer gaming, Mr. Sid Meier.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. The title of this talk is The Psychology of Game Design. Everything you know is wrong. I was going to call it, people are funny, gamers are goofy, it's all in your head, or everything you know is questionable. But I thought everything you know is wrong, kind of get the juices flowing, maybe get a little more interaction. The premise of this talk is that, is there any way to get the slides up in the back of the hall? Is that game design is a psychological experience. Gameplay is a psychological experience. When I design a game, a lot of my games are based on historical topics, the history of civilization, railroads, pirates. And the way I would generally approach those topics is, make it realistic, make it true, make it about, the more historical I can make the game, the better it would be. The more railroady the game is, the better. The more piratey it is, the better. And what I found in taking that approach was that a lot of what I thought I knew was wrong. And the reason was because I really hadn't taken into account what really happens in the player's head. And once that became an important part of kind of my design process, things started to become a lot clearer. So the premise here is that by acknowledging the gameplay is really a psychological experience, we can save ourselves a lot of time in certain areas. It makes certain parts of the process easier, makes other parts of the process more difficult. But at the end of the day, I think we end up with a better game. In the process, as we kind of explore this idea, we're going to kind of run into a few psychological concepts. Egomania is one of them we'll have to explore. Basically, if you play Civilization, you are an egomaniac. I mean, it says right on the box, build a civilization to stand the test of time. And you're there like, oh yeah, I can do that, no problem. So you are an egomaniac, okay. We'll also be looking into paranoia, delusion, and self-destructive behavior. This is ways that players actually kind of make the game less fun for themselves. Things they do to kind of detract from the fun of the game, and ways that as a designer we can try and minimize those, preempt those, and try and prevent that from happening. So those are some of the things we'll be looking at in the course of this talk. So the first area where psychology really kind of plays an important role in game design is something I call the winner paradox. In real life, you don't always win. There are, 28 teams in the National Football League, and only one of them gets to win the Super Bowl. There are 25 teams in the NBA. They all go to the playoffs, I guess, but at the end of the day, there's only one team that gets to hold the golden trophy of NBA championness, or whatever that is. So in the real world, the winner, you don't always win. However, in the world of games, you pretty much always win. And the psychological phenomenon is that the player doesn't really complain about that, doesn't object. That's not a problem. I don't get letters saying, dear Sid, I loved your game, but I won way too much. And this is actually true of other forms of entertainment. Rambo, at the end of the movie, he's going to come out all right. Sherlock Holmes always solves the mystery by the end of the chapter. So I think this is kind of fundamental to entertainment, and certainly something that we're aware of in designing video games. That the player, the player's looking for a satisfactory conclusion. That might not always include winning, but very often it does. And this idea of kind of a satisfactory conclusion to the game, I think, is something to really keep in mind in the design process. Some of the tools that we have at our disposal to create this journey for the player through the game, reward and punishment. In other words, good things happening to the player, not so good things happening to the player. There's an interesting dichotomy in how these are deployed in games. When you reward the player, you discovered this cool place on the map. Here's 100 gold. The player, gladly accepts that, doesn't question, did I really earn that? Do I deserve that? Players are very much inclined to accept anything you give them gladly and feel it was their own clever play, their own incredible strategy that earned them that cool reward. On the other hand, if something bad happens to the player, your game is broken, there's something horribly wrong, the game is cheating, it's really important to be very careful with the setbacks that the player experiences in the game. It's important that the player understand why those things happened, and especially how to prevent that from happening the next time. And anytime you can kind of plant that seed of the next time in the player's head, you're well on your way to this idea of replayability, that the player's going to play again. Next time I'm going to try something different, maybe that might not happen. So a big part of the value of these games is in their replayability. So any opportunity that you have to plant the seed of replayability, I think, is important. And by really carefully handling the idea of punishment and setbacks, where you explain why it happened and how it can be prevented the next time, that's very important. In terms of rewards, another key thing that we think about is the first 15 minutes. One of our rules of game design is that the first 15 minutes have to be really compelling, really fun, kind of almost a foreshadowing of all the cool stuff that's going to happen later in the game. And these rewards are really a way of making the player feel comfortable in this world, letting them know that they're on the right track. They're on their way. Cool stuff is happening, and even cooler stuff is going to be happening later on. And these early rewards, you can almost not reward the player enough in the very early stages of the game to kind of get them invested, get them committed, get them to be part of the world that you're creating. Now, this doesn't negate the value of difficulty levels. I'm not advocating an elastic difficulty that kind of always pushes the player forward and never provides any challenges. A number of years ago, I gave a talk on difficulty levels and was very convincingly made the point that 4 difficulty levels were the perfect number of difficulty levels. There needed to be one for introducing the player to the game, where the player could basically always win, one for the casual player, one for the player who's really experienced, and then the 4th difficulty level, which would be the ultimate challenge. I was wrong about that. Apparently we need 9 difficulty levels. The latest Civilization 4 has 9 difficulty levels, and it really points out how this idea of progress and advancement is so rewarding for the player. The reason we have these difficulty levels is to give the player this feeling that there's always another challenge out there, that they've mastered this level, they're ready to move on to the next level. And that's another reward, is this idea of getting to the next level in the game. So you want your player to feel that they are above average. They're doing well, and they're going to do even better as they go deeper into the game. I think that again, if you kind of follow the first 15-minute rule, it's very important that you kind of start the player off with a very positive experience.